So we're going to be wearing the same clothes for the next 3 episodes.
Why? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's fine.
That's fine.
All right, so what are we talking about today?
Resumes and CVs. How exciting.
Are you looking for a job?
I am looking for a job. Do you want to hire me? Okay. No, it's the time of the year when a lot of students and people are looking for jobs and internships. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk about resumes. I mean, basically what happened was at the school I teach, there was a career fair and all of my students were trying to apply for internships and a bunch of them had questions about resumes. So I figured I would just put that content in a podcast and then forward them to the podcast so I don't have to keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah.
Wait, but they're fourth year. They are looking for... Oh, yes, okay, yeah. They're
Summer
looking for
internship.
summer internship. Yeah. I was like, what? Aren't they looking for a job? But no, they have one more year. So,
Yeah, they have another year.
Never mind.
So first of all, the difference between resume and CV, which is a common confusion. I keep looking right at the camera. A common confusion amongst people. A resume is brief. It's only 1 or 2 pages, right? So a lot of people advocate for 1 page, but 1 or 2 pages, not more than that. As curriculum vitae, however, is typically, depending on your experience, much longer than that, and it's much more inclusive. So where a resume would be more tailored to a specific position that you're looking for, a CV is much more likely to stay the same regardless of where you're applying because it includes it includes like everything. It's a much more thorough listing of the achievements you've done.
That's interesting. I will have to look it up actually because in France we only have, I think, the word CV.
Yeah.
There is no resume equivalent. It's CV, so it's curriculum vitae, right? But apparently it's supposed to be 1 page, so...
The resume or the CV?
There is no resume in France. There is only CV.
It's only 1 page?
Well, apparently the standard is 1 page, so it would be interesting for me to look more into that. I'm wondering.
Okay, well, this is if you're applying for an internship or job in the United States and not in France, then this talk applies. I mean, it's the same everywhere, right? It doesn't really make a difference, I don't think. But so to cover the basics, a few of the questions that I've come across is 1, the length of the resume. Again, it should be 1 or 2 pages, not more than that. You're not listing off all of your experiences in great detail. If you can cram it into 1, that's probably better. If you have 2 pages, my recommendation would be to put in the bottom right-hand corner of the page, 1 of 2, so they know that there's 2.
And your name at the bottom too.
And the name at the bottom. I mean, the only problem with having 2 pages is that they might not flip to the second page. Other than that, I don't think it's an issue.
But that's also if you send it via mail, right? I mean, if you send a PDF, they're sure going to see that there's 2 pages. They look at it.
Hopefully. But the other thing, too, is you have to realize that we're still at the point in time where the people reviewing these PDFs might be older, and they're probably of a generation where they don't see that well, which is having to do with font size of your type. But also they're probably not the ones using really sophisticated programs. That's a decent guess, and that's likely to happen out of all the places you're applying to, that the partners reviewing it, they don't use Revit, they don't use Rhino, they don't use these kinds of things. So you want to keep it as simple as possible. So I would not assume that they're intelligent enough to know that there's 2 pages or that they should look. And also, if they're really busy, they're just going to fly through them. They might not bother flipping to the second page. So
yeah. I mean, the standard seems like it's 1 page, right? But like I told my sister when she recently applied for a job, I was like, nobody is not going to consider you because you have a CV that's 2 pages instead of 1.
It's not a make or break deal.
It's, like if you have a lot of stuff that is really valuable and you should have in your CV, don't feel like you have to make it 1 page.
Yeah.
Make it 2 page. As long as it's justified, right? As long as there is a reason for you to use 2 pages instead of 1.
Yeah, and presumably if you're listening to this podcast, you're a designer of some kind, and so you should understand the principle of being efficient with the space. And you don't want the 1 page to be so bloated that it's hard to read. And we're used to cheating and massaging spaces between the text and doing 9.5 size font. Like, you don't want to do too much of that with a resume because it's not it becomes difficult to read, and you don't want it to be difficult to read. At the same time, if you have 2 pages and but really you should only have like 1.25 page of content, it would be better to squish it down to 1 page.
Yeah.
And, if you're a designer and board layouts, you should know how to do that.
And like you mentioned, like the standard things, such as the margins, don't try and make like a 1/4 inch margin all around it. Try to keep the standard margins. Right?
So I would keep at least 1 inch on the borders. I think 1.5 inch even is what's typical for like a paper, like a written essay. So yeah, I think margins are a good thing to have.
And and like you said, font sizes don't go, let's say, below
10, below 10.
Below 10.
Yeah.
Try, if you use like funky fonts because you want to do something different and graphics, like sure, why not? Maybe, for titles and things, but for the actual like blocks of text that people have to read with the information that they really are seeking to find on your page, I try to stick to like a very easy to read type of font.
Yeah. I also, if you're applying for a design position, presumably you have a work samples or a portfolio to go along with this. So that's where you're going to display your, design capabilities anyway, not in some papyrus font or whatever bullshit you're going to use.
It is. And I think it's important to mention that because ideally you kind of want to work, the graphic aspect of both your CV and your work samples, if you send them together, to look like they belong together, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to format like, your CV with like Times New Roman and then have your portfolio being like all kinds of like crazy different stuff. It should match in a way, right?
And that reminds me, I would not, at the physical copy, I wouldn't staple your resume and your work samples together. And when you're sending a PDF, I would still keep them separate, keep the resume separate and your work samples separate. Putting them together would seem like it'd be more efficient, but it's confusing. Like when partners go to print out something, they want to know what they're printing. They won't have to search for stuff within a PDF. So keep them separate. Also, in terms of, you're mentioning Times New Roman font, there's nothing wrong with that font, but you are a designer, so the resume has to look nice, and it should look custom, in my opinion. If I open up a resume and it looks like it was made in Word, Microsoft Word, and you're using bullet points that are like the standard bullet points.
I just throw up all over your resume. That's what I would do. Just like, okay. No, seriously.
I know. But
like you're not in high school anymore, right? You know how to use computers. You even know how to make custom fonts on Instagram, right? So like, be creative, have some fun.
Right. So it should look custom, and not like it was made by an accountant. The next question that comes up pretty often is whether or not there should be a photo. Now, apparently, according to certain institutions and groups and organizations who exist to help people find work and et cetera, according to them, you should absolutely not have a photograph on your resume.
Well, there is a concern, and it's the same in France, actually. Technically, you're not supposed to put neither your picture or your age on it. Because those are two things that could get you to be discriminated by the person reviewing your resume.
Right.
So society or a portion of society thinks that if you omit this information, you won't get discriminated on those 2 points. I mean, you can get discriminated on anything, right? It could be like where you're from. It could be they don't like your name. It could be like where you live, your neighborhood.
Well, this was something
it could be anything.
This was something one of my students brought up. He's like, well, if I clearly have a Hispanic last name, probably I'm Hispanic. This is true, but also you could be David Lee, and it could be a white dude, and it could be a basketball player or a singer. Well, David Lee Roth, or a singer, and you wouldn't know. My personal opinion is that I would include a photograph because I think I understand the reasons for not including it, that they might, stereotype against you. But my position in response is kind of like, well, if they're going to look at a photograph of an Asian person and say, I don't want another Asian person, then maybe I don't want to be at that office anyway. That's one way to look at it. But the other thing with the resume is that you're trying to establish a connection with the person reading it. And the challenge is, as we said before in episode 90 something, talking about applying for jobs and internships, applying for work, is that there are so many applicants submitting to these offices, especially if they're big name offices, hundreds of applicants. Now, if you imagine a pile of 100 sheets of paper, it's fucking thick. That's a thick stack of paper. Obviously, they're probably it's going to be digital. Fine, 100 PDFs. That's a lot of PDFs. You have to try and stand out of those 100. So I think the real goal is making a connection with who's ever reading it. And to that end, I think having a photograph is a really good idea because it makes you a person that's different from all the other ones that are just black and white text, black and white text, black and white text.
Well, and the thing too is that the people reviewing the resumes, they're looking for new faces to join their team, right? And you could kind of get a vibe of, oh, okay, this guy is a dick. Like you can tell from his face that he's not a nice person.
Right.
Or you can tell that, oh, she looks a little, quirky. Like she might be fun to have in an office environment. That could actually play in your favor. And the truth is that, okay, fine, you can be discriminated based on the picture that you have on your resume. But if you don't put any, and you get an interview, well, then they're just going to discriminate you the day of the interview. So it's just,
let down your Asian.
No, but it's just, postponing the inevitable, right? So
yeah,
I would say just do yourself a favor and put it there. The only thing is, don't put a picture of you at the beach or on your vacation or
unless you have
with
a good body.
Funky, well, no. Or like funky haircuts. Like try to be professional. Try to really think about that picture as how you would want clients to see you.
Well, let's think about the picture, right? So you're trying to make yourself look more like a human being, right? Which helps. But like you said, it needs to be a good photograph. It can't be some Facebook, MySpace, whatever bullshit thing. It has to be a nice photograph, and honestly, and one where you're dressed nicely too, and preferably one where you're smiling and you're looking like a nice person. They are going to judge you based on the photograph. And the real question is, do I want to work with this person? Or more specifically for all offices, but especially small ones, which the vast majority of architecture offices are pretty small, is do I want to be in a room with this person 5 to 7 days a week, 40 to 90 hours a week, right? If you were in the photograph and you're doing a really dark, gothic kind of looking thing and you're really cool in the shadows, well, okay, that looks like a pretentious dick. I don't want to work with that person. Oh, that's really cool. You went to this like really pretentious school. I don't give a fuck. I don't want to work with you. You look like an asshole. I have someone in mind.
Or the firm is looking for that, and then that's great. You're feeling right in.
So maybe take a series. Take one where you look like a vampire, then you can go work at whatever firm for an unpaid internship. I think smiling is important.
But you could also really tailor the picture for the place you're applying to.
Yeah.
If you want to take it to the next level.
That's next level stuff. But I think in general, smiling and looking like a happy person that someone wants to talk to is the route. And I think in design, especially in architecture, maybe we pride ourselves on being cool and dark and mysterious or quirky or whatever. But again, when you're in an office, deciding whether or not you hire someone has so much to do with the personality and whether or not you just want to be around them. You know what I mean? And to that end, a nice looking person that's in the sunlight, that's smiling, that's symmetrical, not doing some weird crooked smile from the side. This stuff, I think, is important. So that's my opinion on the photograph. I think it's worthwhile to include if it's a good one. If it's a shitty one, or if you look, again, like some kind of zombie, then maybe it's not worth it. Or frankly, how do I put this? Okay, well, I have my own personal theory that people like to be surrounded by beautiful people. And if that's the case, then you should just keep that in mind. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you're ugly, then what do you do?
Well, you can't just put someone else's photograph in there. Dude, Brad Pitt, he's applying to my office.
No, but the picture is actually, I think, an even bigger thing than people think about when they do their resume, because it is really how you are going to present yourself, to your boss, to your coworker, to the client, to the world, as a professional, as an architect. Like it's not just to look good on the paper. It's also, you should question, like, how do you currently dress up?
Right.
Do you wear makeup? Do you need a haircut? You know, kind of like it is time to flush yourself up a little bit so you look good before you start a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So...
Is that it for the
So
good luck at fixing your
no,
face?
but actually, you know, I was thinking about it. Even when I did like summer jobs in architecture school, I always had a picture on my resume, and I think it really helps.
It also helps if you're a young, attractive French female applying for whatever positions. You know, I mean, it's going to be rough for some of the people out there.
If you're attractive, you should definitely use that as your advantage.
I mean, you know, that's kind of joking. I mean, realistically, it's less to do with how attractive you are and more to do with whether or not you look like a nice person to hang out with or to talk to. It doesn't matter really if you're attractive or unattractive. If you're really beautiful, but you look like a pretentious asshole, then it's a problem. The next question which comes up is, should I have a description, like a long sentence, full sentence, you know, 5 lines of text where I talk about myself in some way? Or do I just leave it as a bullet point list of all my experiences and et cetera?
I think it's good to have, because you can possibly list almost like a mini biography about yourself without being like bullet points. What's also good with resumes, it's kind of to mix how you list the content in different ways. Instead of just having a bunch of bullet points with dates on the left side and it's all looking the same, I think it's good to mix up how you present your information, right? So and also it makes yourself more, it makes the resume looks like this is a human person, right? It's a little narrative. It's almost like if they could say those sentences themselves, you know? Yeah.
And I think, again, according to the same organizations who say you shouldn't have a photograph, I believe they also think that you should not have a paragraph, or it's not, a paragraph is overstating it. It's more like just a few sentences. You know, they should just be stripped down. These are the experiences bullet point thing. I tend to agree with you on the long form writing. I think the other way to look at it too is that the resume can be viewed at different speeds, right? So you can look at the resume really quickly, which I'm going to look at the name of the person, photograph, maybe the firms they worked at and the schools they went to. That's really quick. The next level is to see maybe specifically what position they had at these offices. And the next level beyond that is to maybe read the text where there's some kind of humor, there's something funny in it, or it's something more personable, or at least it shows that this person can write and think coherently. So I don't have a problem with it, but again, this should be minimized to like 5 lines of text, and it should be add something to the resume, so it's not just a regurgitation of all the other bullet point material. And it has to be well written.
You know, it could, instead of, writing down from France, lived here, you know, like you could be like, oh, I was, born and raised in France and I moved to the States and so started working. Just so they have some kind of background picture of where you're from and kind of situate you within that list of information.
It should be full sentences. It shouldn't be fragmented sentences.
Yeah.
You know, because that already exists everywhere in the other parts of the resume. So I don't have an issue with it.
The other thing I would say too is that if you're a foreign student or a foreigner who's working in the US, and you're applying for jobs, if people see that you're from another country, they could kind of put you aside because they're going to think, oh, I'm going to have to sponsor them for a visa, this and that. And sometimes you need that stuff, but you don't necessarily need to say on your resume that you require sponsorship. Like that could come next if they contact you. However, if your visa legal working situation is settled, you don't need them to do anything. You're legally able to work. I think you should definitely mention that on your resume. Yeah. So they can be like, oh, okay, so she doesn't need sponsorship. She's from abroad, but she doesn't need sponsorship, so we can hire her tomorrow. She can start right away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a big check-off box, and they don't put you on the category of, oh, this is going to cost us time and money. Yeah. So it's important.
We're struggling with the sunlight. We have skylights in this room, which is fantastic. Like if you're just enjoying the space, but if you're trying to work or record something, it's a problem because like the sun comes right where it is, and we, it's like, ah!
Some people don't have sunlight, so I should enjoy it.
Some people don't have sunlight when they're living in caves. We don't worry about those people. I think though, what you said gets to a larger point of how you understand, how you approach the resume in a way. You're trying to sell yourself. And I think a lot of people, especially, excuse me, if they're students and haven't worked a lot and they don't have the confidence of experience yet, they are really timid to sell themselves, right? And they don't want to exaggerate, and they're afraid to put down stuff if it doesn't quite fit within what they assume should be in a resume, and they're afraid to leave out information that they feel like they should put in. But really, you're just trying to get an interview, right? So if that means leaving out information that they will want to know eventually, then fucking leave that out, just as you said. And if there's information that they might not ask for, but would make you stand out amongst everyone else, then put that in.
It's a filtering game, right? So anything that could potentially not get you to the next step, that could be a problem, save it for later.
Yeah.
It's not lying, it's just you're saving that information for a later time, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And if there's something that would make you different from other people, but in a good way, then that needs to be like on the top of it.
Yes.
Right.
Because the other thing you have to imagine, so one of the other questions that came up from my students is like, what do we put on the resume if I don't have any experience?
So that's actually the most exciting part of the resume. Well, I mean, if your life really sucks and you haven't done shit, then that's going to be hard, right? But it's actually very, very exciting because you kind of have to do like a Sherlock Holmes work. You have to dig into every single thing in your life that you've been involved to, like date and time and people and really, really try to, put together all that information that you never thought you could use, right?
Yeah. That's the challenging part of making a resume, is that it's basically you going backwards and inspecting your life with a fine-tooth comb to find out all the stuff. And that is really the most difficult part. So like I was sitting down with my students, I was looking at his resume, and it was decent. But again, the question of like, what do I put down if I'm still a student? I haven't worked at offices like, full-time, et cetera. But it's like, okay, let's go year by year, month by month, and all the seasons. What did you do at that time? Did you do anything at all? Were you on the honors list? Did you submit for a competition? Did you perhaps do something that shows your leadership and leadership skills and your level of responsibility that's not related to design or architecture? Yeah, I did. Then put that in. It's relevant.
Did you work when you were in school? Like, were you a TA? Did you do field trips in places that, no one else went to? Like, anything that you think is kind of out of the ordinary simple path of being a student. Right?
And most often there's actually a lot more stuff to people's lives than they think. I mean, even for us, all the stuff we've done, you don't remember it because you do it and you move on to the next thing. You totally forget about it. And so it is that process. And you're right, though. If you haven't done anything in your shitty portfolio, then you're fucked. And that's your own problem.
But then you just realize it, so now you can start working on it.
The other thing to keep in mind is who your competition is. So if you're applying for an internship and you're a student, your competition are other students, right?
Yeah. So
like the question of what do I do because I don't have 5 years of experience? Well, you're not in that category, so don't even worry about it. That's not your competition.
Yeah.
If you apply for a job or for whatever it is, and they don't accept you because you don't have, you're missing 5 years of experience, then don't even be concerned. Don't stress out about it. That was never meant for you anyway. Your competition is the people that have the same level of experience as you. So that also means, exactly as you pointed out, if there's something that makes you stand out as being special, more responsible, more creative, more self-motivated is a big one, then put that down, even if it's not necessarily about design or architecture.
Let's say you have hobbies that are a big part of your life. You do sports to a very high level, or you've been doing the same sport or playing the music instrument for like years and years. Well, you put that down because it shows some kind of commitment, regularity, discipline, and it doesn't all need to revolve around architecture and what you're applying for. It could be extended to different fields as long as it shows that you're not doing it at an amateur level, you know.
I think the other thing too is because you don't have experience, and they're going to hire you more on whatever mini MINI accomplishments you've made and the type of person you are, right? So that even gives more credibility to the thing that you just said. Like for me, I had a decent music background, music performance. I would always put that in. All the awards, all the festivals I went to, the fact that I was the drum major and I led this ensemble and we played in the Walt Disney Concert Hall and whatever, like that has nothing to do with design and architecture, except for isn't the concert hall, and nothing really. Still put it in there because guaranteed if I have 2 resumes and they're identical in terms of architectural and design experience, right? But one of them, this guy was part of a music ensemble, different music ensembles, and he led those groups and he performed as a soloist. Yeah, I want to talk to this person. And they have a photograph next to someone who has no photograph and is just not even a human being. There's no personality. Yeah, I'm going to talk to the person that sounds interesting.
Yeah, or anything that you feel like is a big part of your life. Like when I first applied for my first job, I didn't really, I didn't do sports, I didn't play music, I didn't have any of that, but, I had to write like 2 big papers for school on like very big architectural questions. I mentioned that. They were like school papers, but they were still like, 100-page each, so it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And it shows them that you can think and you can write, so I think it's important. I love photography. I had a little photography website where I put the link in, so they could see what I'm interested in. Only if it's good and you think it's worth being seen by the people who are hiring you, right? If it's just pictures of you and your mom going on vacation, I don't put that in there. But if you're taking pictures in a creative way, interesting way, I think that's worth putting in. If you're part of any organization, like you do volunteer work or you support like the homeless shelter every Sunday, like put that in. It shows who you are as a person. And it is important. Especially
if the position you're going for is a long-term, is a full-time hire, then they are looking for people to solve their short-term issues. Like we need faculty, we need employees to put out this work, to do this work. But they're also looking for someone for the long term. And what offices really don't want is to bring on someone and then have to take care of that person and handhold them, especially if they're younger. This is the concern with younger hires. It's like, am I going to hire this person and I have to babysit them, especially if they're just moving to New York, right? Like, am I going to have to fucking tell this person how to get to the office and you'll be late all the time because of the subway or whatever? I don't want to deal with that stuff. I want a responsible human being who not only will do their work, but will push the firm forward and look for opportunities for the office. So if you have all these achievements that you've figured out and you've done just in your own right because you're self-motivated, that is amazing for offices because that means that you're going to bring that thing for them. You know what I mean? So it doesn't really matter that the endeavors that they embarked on didn't have to do with architecture. It's still showing to me that they had the motivation to do this thing. Yeah. And if they like my office and I think I'm a good boss and I create this kind of environment, they're going to do that for me now.
Yeah.
So this is the mentality I bring to the resume, more than, according online, I can't have this thing, I must have that thing. Nah, I don't buy it.
And that's the beauty of working for a creative profession, right? You have so many ways to like present yourself and do your resume about. It's not like a standard accountant job where you're just like listing a bunch of crap like bullet points by bullet points. And even in the graphic format, you could be a little more creative than like the standard layout of, boring resumes.
It's a good point too that we are in a creative field, so there is this kind of it's more acceptable for these kinds of things too.
And it's almost expected without going like crazy intense like stuff, right? But it is expected that you have the understanding and ability to tailor things for what they're directed to, right? The other thing is the address. So I was remembering before I moved to Paris and applied for architecture school, I remember that my teachers told me to use a Paris address because otherwise the school would not even consider me to get in. And we can, go back to that when we do a recording about how to apply for schools and stuff. And I think when I was in France and we applied for jobs in New York, I'm pretty sure I didn't put any location or address on my resume. Meaning I'm giving you some appetizers, meaning my resume. You're going to grab it, you're going to like it, you're going to want more, and then you're going to find out where it comes from, right? That's basically it. So let's say you live in, I don't know...
Lebanon?
Or even like, you know, I don't know, like you live in Laguna Beach, right? Okay. And you apply for a firm that's in LA.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm the boss in LA and I see your resume, I'm like, is this person going to be commuting every day to my office? Mm-hmm. I have the same level of candidate on the other side and he lives in LA. I'm going to hire that person, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you don't want to be like very specific. Unless you are in LA and the firm is in LA, then don't even, you know, ask the question. But if you're not in the city where the firm is located, either be generic about it and you're in Laguna Beach, just put LA. I mean, same difference.
Right.
Or you're in New York and you want to move to LA, maybe don't put anything.
No, it's a good point.
And you can discuss that with them during the interview.
Absolutely. And I was just talking to someone who's trying to get an internship in New York City, and obviously they live in California. And I told them, don't put down your address or put down an address in New York because of exactly as you said. And
I mean, after, you know, when I was in France before moving to New York, I had interview by doing that. I have FaceTime interview while in France with a New York office who was really considering me. And, you know, when I told them, yeah, sure, I can, you know, do an interview, but what about a Skype interview? Oh, yeah, Skype interview. And we had a Skype interview. It was,
it's common now.
It's common, but now. At least they reviewed my resume and contacted me.
Yeah.
You know,
did you pin up a picture of the Empire State Building behind you? I'm just on a rooftop in New York.
No, I have like a little like folding divider behind me. But the guy who did the interview with me on Skype, I think he wasn't used to do Skype interview, so it was like really, really close. His face was really, really close to the webcam, and I just kept like scooching back, like, dude, like your face is taking the whole screen. It was so weird.
I don't get it, especially when it's totally off tangent. But Skyping with parents, and they're like not even on the screen. Like, how are you doing today? Like, I can't fucking see you. We should just be on the phone.
My dad does that all the time. I see his forehead, so when he does that, I just move the same way, so it just sees my forehead. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing what you're doing.
So that's actually a decent point, right? If you're going to do a Skype interview, you have to fix the background. And even for this, if you saw the room we're in, it's a fucking catastrophe. But on the cameras, it looks half decent because we had to spend half an hour like staging it. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, definitely leave off the address. And if you get to an interview and they ask you, so I understand you're not here yet, do you have housing? This is where like the gray area and the white lies come into play. And if you have housing lined up, then yes, you tell them I have housing. If you don't have housing, then the question is, like the student I was talking to, do you know anyone in New York City? I know someone 2 hours away from New York City. Okay, no. Do you know anyone at all in either Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, or even the Bronx? Friend of a friend, Brooklyn. Great, you have housing. You tell them that you're going to be staying with a friend in Brooklyn, and it's all set up, and you have your dates. This puts them at ease. This is
and you know, if you get the Skype interview and you're like, yeah, you know, I'll be in New York in like a month from now, they might put you on the back burner, but they might want to see you in person once you get to New York, let's say, right, to have an actual in-person interview and then give you or not give you the job. But there is strong chances that they're still going to require to see you in person before giving you the internship or the job.
Maybe.
So you have to be prepared for that kind of situation.
What else?
References
on a resume, I don't typically put.
I don't put it on the resume, but and that might not necessarily be for like internship application, maybe more like for job application. I think having a list of 2-3 people that if they're not so sure about you, you're like, I can provide you with references if you need. Just, you know, like if they're kind of on the verge of giving you the job or the internship or not giving it to you, they're unsure, and you can feel that in their correspondence. Just offer. I have like, you know, a few references I can send to you. Feel free to reach out to them, you know, and make sure that you reach out to your references before you send their name out, letting them know that you're applying to such and such place. They're considering you. Yeah. You're really interested if they could speak nicely about the experience they have with you. And it could be pretty much anyone that's relevant, right? I remember I had like a teacher from my thesis year. I had previous employers. I had a previous construction manager I worked with very closely, and a contractor I work with very closely. And it's good to have a variety of people because that also shows how good you are on all of those different levels of relationship, which for a firm is golden, right? I mean, you're good at your homework and, your personal research. You're good at working with a guy who's going to get the shit built. You're good with talking to a client. You're good, it's good.
It's good.
No, it's good. It's super important. It doesn't, it doesn't all need to be just teachers or just like previous bosses.
No, it shouldn't be.
You really need to think like who can bring something to my application.
And this is the same approach you take with the resume in general, and especially a portfolio, which we'll do in another episode. But it's you're going to look at all the different angles or avenues that make up a productive human being in an office, and you tackle each of those in different ways. Which is why I don't have an issue. Which is why, like with my resume or especially my CV, I have different categories for different types of experience. There's teaching experience, which is separate from professional experience. And earlier in the days, I went so far as to separate out like architecture experience versus miscellaneous design or graphic design or whatever, photography or whatever I called it, right? You don't want to have like 15 different categories because it's overly aggressive and unnecessary. You want to cluster them. But I don't have a problem with listening to the different types of experience. And partly because, again, if they're going to look over the resume at that quick speed kind of reading, like very quickly, okay, boom, there's 5 different types of experience this person has, or maybe 5 as much, 4 or 3 or whatever. That stands out from a person who just has one potentially. And
then there is also the question of, where do I start with on my resume? Do I start with schooling experience or experience?
It's education, then your professional experience, and then if you're going to do like skill set or whatever.
But I feel like it could be adapted again depending on what you're applying to versus what's the strongest in your background, right? So let's say, like my sister, for example, she had experience in the field that was completely different than the field that she was trying to get a new job into because she's changing career, right? So putting her professional experience first, well, then you see that she has basically no professional experience in that new field.
But you don't, I mean, maybe someone can provide an argument against this, but you never put professional experience first. It's always your education first in reverse chronological order. As far as I know, I've never seen any resume that doesn't.
But again, I feel like it depends on the situation.
I don't know. I think it's a safe bet to put your education first because that's just an accepted, understood thing. Because they're not going to judge you based on just one or the other, or they shouldn't. They should look at both your actual experience and then your education and the degrees you have. So if it was me, I would always put education first. The most recent degree you have, or if you're in the middle of school and you haven't graduated yet, question is, do I put that down? You put that down. Yeah, you're going to graduate with a bachelor's. As far as you're concerned, as far as the world's concerned, you're going to have that in the next year. So put it down, and then you put down the professional stuff, experience after that. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean that's what I typically do. But again, I think it's important to question that order based on what you have versus what you want.
Well, that becomes especially true if you have a mixed bag of experiences and you're changing careers and stuff like that. But again, they're hiring a human being. They're not hiring someone that just has a list of firms written down. So that's where these other experiences that would feel irrelevant could very well be relevant to the person that they're hiring to do good work and to be on time, right? That has nothing to do with architecture or the firms you worked at per se. And so that's what I would say in terms of order. I think also, so when you're listing your education, obviously the name of the institution, when you graduated or when you're soon to graduate, all the degrees you have, majors, minors, and if you have honors. And if you did extensive studying in one field but you didn't get a degree, I would actually still put that in because it's significant to you.
I think it's super, like you were saying, it's super important especially if you don't have much to put on your resume, to be as detailed and precise in the description of every single items you're listing out.
And that also applies to the professional experience. So
especially,
I would imagine I want to see the name of the office, where they're located, how long you were there for. You don't need to get down to the specific day. Months are fine, right? Or years if it was a long, long time. But our audience right now is probably not. They don't have 10 years of experience. You should also write down your position, your title. And if that's really generic, like architectural draftsman or whatever, write down the kind of work you did. Because then as employer, I want to know the name of the office, because it might be someone big time, where they're located. I want to know the kind of work they do and the kind of work you worked on. Just an office name and tell me you're an architectural drafter. That means nothing. I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, the titles are oftentimes you will find out as you work in offices is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
So it means nothing. Actually listing the, almost like the specific task you were being put in charge of is more interesting.
Especially if you're younger, yeah.
Like, were you doing conceptual design, competition design? Were you doing drafting or 3D modeling?
But even so with drafting and 3D modeling, I would go more specific, especially if it's in your favor. If it's not in your favor, then that's different. But if it's in your favor, like what kind of drafting? Is it just generic schematic stuff that everyone had to redo because you did a shitty job? Or were you doing design details or construction details and organizing
client presentation
sets?
Or any permitting sets or anything like that?
There's a big gap between like full CDs later on down the line, as anyone with experiences knows, versus doing like, oh yeah, I did drafting and conceptual phase. Like these are different things. And also a big difference between doing Revit modeling, BIM modeling versus, oh, I did SketchUp. So if it's in your favor, put it down.
Same with like project types, if you're applying to a firm that does a lot of different work and you're interested in that and you have experience working on firms who did residential, commercial, list those up within each firm experience so they can see that you already have some kind of knowledge about the different typologies. If you're applying to a firm that only does residential and you only have commercial experience, don't mention it.
I would mention it.
You could, but you don't necessarily have to insist on it. You know what I mean?
I just think it's...
okay, so they won't know anything about residential.
Well, then you're fighting an uphill battle no matter what. The first thing you would do is, again, go through your life and find out what other residential experiences you have. Was that a motorcycle? Fucking motorcycles. They think they're so cool, but it's just annoying to everyone else.
Singing in this garden.
It's just embarrassing. What? Really? It's a motorcycle, you nut. Okay, anyway. I would still list the commercial experience because I don't think it would do you harm. Then
try, if you only have the same type of experience in project types, try to be a little more precise. Was it, office spaces, event, stores, like what kind of commercial? Try and get more into the detail of it.
So I think also one question that came up, which was a good one, is like this person I was talking to had experience. They had done design work and done submitted to the city, or they were about to submit to the city. That's how far along the drawings were, but it didn't happen. And it was just him freelancing. And he's like, do I include that? Because it didn't happen. I'm like, yeah, include that.
Well, you did the work for it.
So I think there's also maybe a misconception among students that if the buildings weren't done that don't count or something, I don't know. Or if I didn't work at an office, it doesn't count. I don't know. If you did the work, it's the same thing as if whether or not you worked at an office or whether or not it was built. Like 90% of the projects in the world don't get built. So just because it doesn't get built or doesn't get submitted to the city, irrelevant. You did the work.
Even if it's a proposal for a project and the firm wasn't hired, you did the work for the proposal. So you put that in.
Yeah.
The other thing too is if you've worked of pretty large projects or projects of different size, I think it's also good to list that up. If you work on a project who was 1 million square foot and a project that was like 2,000, well, it's good to show that because again, it shows your understanding of scales and planning and like maybe they also envision that there is a bigger team on that project versus a smaller team on that project, so they could again situate you and try to project you within their team more easily.
Yeah. They need to understand you as a human being, as a person. They need to be able to visualize you and see if you could fit in the office. That's why I really think that if you stick to like the accepted standard rules of how to make a resume and information, it filters out too much of what makes you a desirable employee or a desirable hire, potentially, right? So, but you also don't want to go too overboard with it. And this is where the person creating the resume has to be smart enough and intelligent enough to know where that line is, because you want it to seem professional and not just full of, random stuff. But I would not hesitate to put in some of these things.
Yeah.
What else is there?
That's all on my list. I don't know if you have anything else, but I think that's
pretty extensive.
Pretty good
awards and recognitions is a category I've always had in my stuff.
I never had it in mind, but it's, not everybody has award or has been recognized.
Yeah, some of us are just killers. But again, mostly it's going through your life and trying to find all the important stuff to you. And, winning the Green Medallion for middle school elective drama class doesn't count. But if you have had a hobby is too lightweight of a word, but a passion that stayed with you and you've achieved things and won things because of it, then it's probably worthwhile to put in. And even this is again where I think competitions for students are really important for many reasons, and having them on the resume is one of them. But that's maybe a separate topic. Let's see. We went over the photo, description, the order of the resume, the length of the resume. Whether or not you include miscellaneous material in the resume. Color. Yeah, you can have color. A lot of the resumes are printed or are viewed on the screen. So having a little bit of color to highlight text here and there is fine, but don't rely on it, since most people, when they print, it's going to be black and white on shitty photocopy paper. So don't rely on color.
So if you put color, just do a test print in black and white. Make sure that everything is still legible.
Yeah. That
would be my advice. And if you send it as a PDF, sometimes people, they don't think about those things, but if you, like you said, if you get 100 resumes a day and you save them somewhere on your office server, it would be good if the file was saying maybe your first initial, your last name, and portfolio or resume, or so whenever they're looking for your materials again or they're saving it, they know where it is.
Yeah, I would probably do last name first, underscore, last name, first name, and then resume.
I usually do my first name initial and then my last name.
Disagree with this.
Oh, I think I might actually just do my last name underscore and
last
resume.
Name, the same with any form.
Yeah. And it's something that makes sense, not like, DMZJ02-3, because no one would know what that is.
Last thing is, what are your thoughts about logos on resumes? Students and kids have like their own little like graphic logo for who they are.
No. The firm has their own logo. The firm we're applying to has their own logo. Right. They don't give a shit about some random kid pretending to do logo design. No. Unless you're applying for a graphic firm who does logo, then put it on. Yeah. Otherwise, this is not about your little world,
See, that's interesting, because on the one hand, I think on paper that would, everything you said I can understand, but it would sound contradictory to most of the stuff that we said before, about distinct things to include. But I would agree with you. I think having a logo is, somehow it crosses the line from like the resume, right? We've been advocating for putting other information down, even if it's not directly about architecture. And yet we're saying a logo is too personal. But I really do strongly feel that the logo, I don't know why, but it crosses that line where now it becomes too personal. It becomes too much about you.
It becomes either too personal, or it becomes like, I'm hiring a firm. Like, I'm hiring a consultant whose name is David Lee, and that's his logo, his business logo.
Right. This is who I am. Take me as I am.
Again, they need to be able to project you with their stuff on top of it. So you need to leave room for that, overlay to happen.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I think the other issue with the logo is that we're not, for architects, right? We're not graphic designers. We do decent jobs at producing graphics, but we are not graphic designers. And 90% of the graphic logos made by architects are like halfway decent, but they fall short. So I would just fucking leave it out. It's not necessary. It's not adding anything. Forget the logo. Have a photograph of yourself.
Oh, that was in replacement?
No,
of the,
no.
oh.
Just some people have a logo.
No, forget the logo. I mean, if you want to do like little icons that helps structure your resume, maybe do that. But don't put like
that's
logos.
Different though. That's different because that's about representing information to make things more clearly understood or more friendly to the eyes. A logo is saying like I'm a defined thing. I've figured out who I am. This is, and also the logo communicates that for a business it communicates the identity of the business, and that assumes the business has a brand they're trying to sell. This is what all businesses have or should have. If you have a logo for yourself as a human being, as a young person who's trying to grow, it's antithetical to the idea of growth and to the idea that you're open to learning new things, in my opinion.
And also if you have a logo, what is the logo for? Like if you have your own photography website and that's your photography logo, I understand you have a logo, but that still should not belong on your resume, your architecture resume, right?
It's weird. Because who are you to have a fucking logo? You don't have a business. You're a student or you just graduated. Well, you're so great that you have your own brand. You don't have a fucking brand. And by the way, I have my own brand. I'm not hiring you, as a separate thing. I'm hiring you to be part of my team. But I think the point that the resume has to communicate that you are eager and willing and able to grow is super important. Super important.
Yeah. The logo, if you really, really want to put it in somewhere in your application, like find a corner in your portfolio.
I just wouldn't
to put it in. But again, you have to explain it, and I don't think it's going to get you a job anyway.
I just wouldn't have it, because even projects, even if they stay, once they're finished, they become archived, they become a piece of history in a way, and they don't change. But our perception and our understanding of them evolves over time, and we grow with the projects, and the projects appear to evolve even though they aren't, based on your understanding. And a logo or anything like that is like slapping on a seal that, again, caps the understanding. It's a branding. I find it really off-putting. Really off-putting. And also 90% of the time, they're not good.
I never ever actually saw any of that, but all right. So no logos.
So that's that. So I think that's pretty much it for the resume, but I think having these larger understandings of what the resume is about and what you're trying to communicate is essential for you to create one that makes sense. And and that's the point of being a designer anyway, isn't it? So
on those good words. Goodbye. Good luck.
All right. That's it. Thanks. We are on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube now. And if you liked the episode, please leave a review to support us, really.
Well, leave a review, and after you're done, share with your friends.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's competition against, architects and whatever, but this is a community. You got to help out each other. You found something interesting and helpful.
It is a community.
Share with your friends. It might be helpful to them too.
And is there anything else, really? No, we have a website. In case you're a new listener, which you might be, head to our website where we have all of our previous 100 or so episodes categorized by things. So there is a category called TMC, which is the Midnight Charette, Tips and Tactics. And that's where you'll find other episodes that are specifically about like how to get hired, how to navigate the workplace and things like this. Yep.
Yeah,
we're good.
That's it. And we are on Facebook and Instagram.
Facebook and Instagram. Yeah,
make sure to follow us there too.
Yeah, and actually, we like helping you guys out, obviously, and we like answering questions. And so, if you shoot us an email with a question, either hyper specific to you, we will try and respond, or if something that you want us to address more extensively on the podcast, we can certainly do that, or we will try to. And we've had success with that in the past. And I think that's it for now.
Yep. That's it.
Enjoy. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you again next week or sooner.
Bye-bye.
Bye.